Welcome to the Pennsylvania Trolley Museum's Zoom series, Trolleyology. My name is Kristen Fredrickson. I'm the Assistant Manager of Visitor Experience here at the museum. Thank you again for joining us today. Welcome back to everybody who's joined us before. There's like almost 100 of you. It's very exciting. This virtual series features programs on Pennsylvania transit history topics, stories about the trolley era, and our collection that you can experience from home, usually on a Tuesday or a Wednesday night. We plan to continue these programs regularly. So if you have a show that you would like to share that fits our museum mission, please let me know. That'd be anything about Pennsylvania, the trolley era, cities where our streetcars come from, our collection. And if you have a program that doesn't quite fit those guidelines, please reach out anyway. You can see a full list of upcoming programs on our website, patrolley.org, which I will share in the chat box in just a few minutes. And you'll also have my email address, assistant@patrolley.org, on the email address or the reminder email that you got for tonight's program. I do want to extend a very special thank you to those of you who donated when registering for tonight's program, and those of you who have made donations through our website. We truly appreciate your support of our virtual programs. And last year was our best year ever for Trolleyology. So thank you so much to those of you who donated. And most of you guys probably know about the Trolley Museum, but the Pennsylvania Trolley Museum was established in 1954 as the Arden Electric Railway by a group of trolley enthusiasts called the Pittsburgh Electric Railway Club. And we opened to visitors a few years later in 1963. We're actually located along the route of the former interurban line between Pittsburgh and Washington, PA. You'll find almost 50 trolleys and electric railway cars here, about 20 of which operate. And around 30,000 visitors per year take the 4-mile scenic ride at the museum. And I did want to show you guys some updates. So we have a couple photos from inside our new Welcome and Education Center, which is scheduled to open later this year. That's later in 2023. Looking west across the main exhibit hall towards the secondary exhibit hall on the left side there. And then on the right side, you can see the main atrium looking north. So that's out towards the parking lot. And let's see, we've also got looking across the secondary exhibit area to the south entrance. So on the left-hand picture, on the right side is Volunteer Boulevard. So that's where visitors will board the trolleys. And on the right side here, we have looking east across 3 event rooms. So we're going to have a really great event space, much bigger than what we have now. We're very, very excited. On the outside of the building, you can see they're working on the exterior walls there on the left. And on the right, we've got some restoration happening on an awesome clock that will be part of the new visitor center. So that's Barry Baker on the left and John Hayback on the right. They're always, sometimes they're working on trolleys, sometimes they're working on artifacts like this. And specifically for this program, I wanted to let everybody know it's really funny. Every trolley in the shop right now is a Philadelphia car. So on the left, we have volunteer Jack Demian. He's also our board member working on painting part of 8042 behind him there. And on the right side, a fresh coat of paint has been put on new siding for Freight Motor 07. So that project on the right has progressed very quickly over the past few weeks. If you go to the Pennsylvania Trolley Museum's YouTube page, you can see an update video on that. And we hope to be putting out more dates shortly. All right, so now I would like to introduce today's presenter, Steve Barry. If you don't know Steve, he has been the editor of Railfan and Railroad magazine since 1998. He's from South New Jersey and has been photographing the rails for over 40 years. His latest book, Philadelphia Commuter Rails, a 40-year retrospective, is currently available on his website, www.railroadphotographer.com/books. So I'll put that in the chat at some point today as well. So check that out. Feel free to enter questions and comments in the chat box today. We will have a question and answer session at the end as well, where I'll allow everybody to unmute themselves. And this program is being recorded and will be shared eventually on YouTube. We're all caught up with our YouTube recordings. So if you missed a Trolleyology, go back, on YouTube and check that out. Again, please keep your microphones muted, and I'll ask everybody to turn their videos off at this point as well to minimize distractions. All right, Steve, take it away.
All right, here we go. I'm going to just switch the screen share here. And you should be seeing the title slide.
Yes.
Excellent. That much is working. Okay. Tonight we're going to look at Super Saturday Streetcar Specials. This is a series of streetcar trips sponsored by the Wilmington chapter of the National Railway Historical Society, run over the routes of SEPTA in Philadelphia. Now, a little background on how all this got started. Back in 1992, I was looking for something to do rail fanning wise on the Saturday before the Super Bowl. I didn't want to go very far away from home because I wanted to watch the game the next day. So I thought, what could I possibly do that would be close to home and allow watching the game on Sunday? Well, I was, at the time, I still am, the trip director of the Wilmington chapter. And we had run a handful of streetcar trips in Philadelphia up to that point. Thought, you know what? Let's run a trolley trip on the Saturday. So we did. We contacted SEPTA and arranged a charter for the Saturday. This was never intended to be a series. I'd simply called it Super Saturday Streetcar Special. Now, for the Wilmington chapter trips, unlike some other operators who do charters in Philadelphia, photography is our prime goal. Some operators try to cover as many of the routes as possible on a 4-hour charter. Our charters go 5 hours. We sacrifice a little bit of the mileage because we're more interested in getting photographs. We tell everybody right up front, when you get off the streetcar, get away from the car. We want to do the entire cityscape around the streetcar as well as the car itself. If roster shots are your thing, do that at the rest stops. But otherwise, get back from the car and get the entire scene. So as I said, the first one was in January in 1992. And we always look for something unusual to do for these trips. Well, back in 1992, PCCs were still running on routes 23 and 56 and 15. So the unusual thing back then, strange as it seems now, was to run a PCC on the subway surface lines. So here we see our charter PCC, the 2129, amongst all the Kawasaki cars down at the Elmwood Depot, ready to go out on Super Saturday Streetcar Special. And out we went. Now, I will, one caveat here, up until 2007, these were all shot with slides, and the slides over the course of time have gotten out of order, or shot with 2 cameras or whatever. So the shots on these first several trips might not be in the precise order they were taken during the trip. Once it got digital, then everything just automatically sorts itself. Here we are crossing over the CSX ex-Baltimore and Ohio main line in Darby, and we met a Kawasaki car there as well. This is out on the 13, heading towards Yaden. As I said, back then, this is all Kawasaki territory, and it still is. But our unusual activity was to get a PCC on these routes where you don't normally see them. Here we are at the loop on Baltimore Avenue, next to a regular service Kawasaki car. And crossing over a diamond. Now, I've done these charters for 28 years, probably 350, 400 photo stops. So I may not be able to recall exactly where we were for all these shots. It's been a lot. This is pretty easy. Here we are at the Darby Loop, as the sign indicates. And down at the Eastwick Loop with a regular service K car alongside our charter car in the loop. So 3 years went by, and it got to be time to plan another trip. I thought, you know what? Let's do this again. So in 1995, we revived the idea. This time we slapped a number onto it, Super Saturday Streetcar Special 2. Since the NFL uses Roman numerals for Super Bowls, we decided to use Roman numerals for Super Saturday Streetcar specials. And of course, when you start to number things, that kind of commits you to running them every year. So that's when the tradition really started. For our second year, we used the Peter Witt car that was still in service for charters. And like I said, our goal was for photography. So we get back from the car, we get some of these interesting scenes in the background. Row houses, you'll see a lot of churches. Here we are on Route 56. That was actually by this time, 56, 23, and 15 were all temporarily bussed. You see how well that worked out. But they were all temporarily bussed at the time, but the wire was still up and still active, and SEPTA was using charters to show the city that, hey, these tracks are still usable. It's just temporary busing. That didn't work out so well for the 56 and the 23. But here we are going under the Frankfurt L on the 56. On this trip here, we derailed the car. You can see the scratch there in the street where our car came off on a loop out in the 56. We notified SEPTA, who had to find a truck to come out to try to re-rail us. Meanwhile, some of our passengers started to find some scrap wood, and we started working on the car. And before SEPTA's maintenance folks got there, we had the car back on the tracks and we're rolling again. Once again, just a handful of scenes from Route 56 that you just don't get anymore. And going underneath the Reading with a train going overhead, also on the Route 56. Number 3 was in 1996. And for this trip, we used the PCC car painted in Red Arrow colors. SEPTA painted a Red Arrow car, PCC, even though Red Arrow never actually had PCCs. As you can see here, it's a pretty rainy, gloomy day. We were out for this trip here. And this trip here, I believe, covered the length of Route 23. Here we are in Center City, coming underneath what was the gallery. Reading Terminal there on the right-hand side. And more views in Center City. And coming underneath the unused Reading line into Reading Terminal, which had been discontinued back in 1984. Out in the rain. Weather doesn't slow us down too much. And we finished off down at the Eastwick Loop. This is our car coming out of the loop, heading back up to Elmwood to conclude the trip. Number 4, 1997, we used one of the cars that had been repainted for the Chestnut Hill Trolley that ran on the north end of Route 23. The light green color with the white top. Here's our car coming into Elmwood. And out on Elmwood Avenue.
Steve, as you predicted, the chat is very active already. I just wanted to pop in and let everybody know that we're seeing their comments. So don't think I'm ignoring you guys, but if it's not related to the slide, I'm not going to bother Steve.
And we try to find interesting backgrounds and things like that for our shots, like this building here. We did go into the Center City Tunnel on this trip. PCCs, of course, no longer are allowed in the Center City Tunnel due to the signaling system there. But back then, we could take our car into the tunnel and out of the tunnel. And cool row houses from a backdrop here. And this is in Yaden with a regular service K car next to our chartered car. And we finished off down on the Eastwick Loop again. It seems to be a traditional last thing we do. We go back to the Elmwood Depot. Anybody who doesn't want to ride anymore can get off there and leave the trip at that point. But for all the diehards, we usually do a run down to the Eastwick Loop to finish off the day. Number 5 originated out of Elmwood as well. Somehow the car there on the left, the silver PCC, we never did use that on the Super Saturday trip, but it was there at Elmwood on this day, and we posed it with our charter car, which was once again the Peter Witt, the 8534. And heading now on Elmwood Avenue. Back then, we could do crazy things like stop in the middle of the Girard Avenue Bridge for a photo stop. You can't do that anymore. Just too much traffic. But here we are with the Amtrak / Pennsylvania Railroad viaduct in the background over the Schuylkill River. Out on the 15, Girard College always makes a good backdrop for photos. And somehow we covered a lot of trackage on this trip here. We wound up on the north end of the 23. This is up in Chestnut Hill. And coming down to 23. And continuing along on the 23. You see our operator there, Richard Weibel. He was the custodian of the Peter Witt during its time on SEPTA. Now we have some problems every now and then. 23 wasn't used in regular service at the time. As I said, only charters were going down this line. So people kind of took liberties parking too close to the tracks. Here you see a van that was parked too close to the tracks. And we have our team of bouncers and pushers at work here. The folks with their butts facing you, they're the bouncers. They bounce the car until it bounces enough to get the front wheels off the pavement. Meanwhile, the pushers are pushing, and when those wheels come off the pavement, in theory, the car should move a couple of inches before it hits the pavement again. We bounced and pushed, and we got it out of the way, though.
Matt Non is watching. He comments that he's the one in the Devon track jacket.
Okay.
Ed Springer in the vest.
Yes. Yeah, Ed was invaluable on all these trips. I'll mention a little more of him later on here. Quite the adventures we have on these trips. Number 6 for 1999, that was a 2-car charter. We had the 2732 you see in the foreground here, in the traditional dark green and cream, and in the background is one of the Chestnut Hill cars. This was probably the most memorable trip of all. It's gone down in history known as the crash and burn trip, and you'll see why in a few minutes. Some of the locals came out to say hi to us, kind of curious about why there were 70 people out taking pictures of streetcars. 2-car charters are difficult to run. I ran several of them. You'll see a few of them here. But with 70 people, the photo lines can get a little bit crazy. Here you see both of our cars together coming down to 23. But for scenes like this, for a 2-car charter, it takes some time because all the folks on the second car want to get this shot too. So you got to wait for them to get off the second car and walk up to the first car where the photo line is. It just takes a little bit of time. And coming through Center City, underneath what was then the gallery. Now, we had gotten down to the end of the line down 10th and Bigler and started back north again. And the city had done some paving work on the route. And in the process, managed to cover up some of the track a little bit. There was still enough contact to get power to the cars, but it made the rails extremely slippery. And coming north, we got to Washington Avenue, and the light in front of us turned red, and our operator hit the brakes, and nothing happened. We just kept on rolling. A box truck off to our right saw the green light for him. He came out right in front of us, making a left-hand turn, turning directly in front of us as we were sliding along. Couldn't do anything about it, and we missed him by just inches. That wasn't even the worst of the trip. Most of these shots here are southbound because that's where the sun was favorable. Northbound, we just sort of ran straight back. Here's the burn. After we had gone past Wayne Junction going south, apparently a truck came through after us that was too tall, hit the wire and knocked it down. Our car hit the dangling wire, and this is the result. It just fried the front of the car. Meanwhile, behind us somewhere, our second car is cruising along, and a driver saw a parking spot he just had to have, put his car in reverse right in front of the second streetcar and backed into it. Colliding hard enough that car was no longer usable either. So almost simultaneously, both cars were taken out of service, and everybody had to catch regular service cars back up to, I think we started out of Germantown on this one here, up to the Germantown Depot for the to get back to our starting point. But because one of our streetcars crashed, one of our streetcars burned, this became known as the crash and burn trip. And I think we're still the only charter group in SEPTA history to wreck two streetcars in the same day. Number 7 was not as eventful. We got the Peter Witt again. Had some nice snow on the ground for this one here. We are cruising down on the 13 coming into Yeadon in a nice snow-covered scene. One of my favorite spots to shoot on these charters is the 40th Street portal. These houses really provide a real nice background here.
This looks like the first one with snow.
It probably is. We haven't had snow all that often on the ground for these trips. We did take the Peter Witt into the tunnel. And here we are out of the tunnel, and the one thing we can't do is block regular service cars when we do these charters. We stop for photos. So here we have a regular service car is caught up to us. So it's like snap the picture real fast and run back onto the car and get going. This was a 2-car charter, by the way. We had the 2732 out as well. Here we see both of our charter cars at the loop in Yeadon. And both together. And here they are down at heading towards Eastwick. The Eastwick shot was probably one of the last shots of the trip. Like I said, some of these slides have gotten out of order, or so I scanned them at different times. Here we see the 2 cars together at the loop on Baltimore Avenue. And we do a lot of running on what's known as the diversion trackage in Philadelphia. The diversion trackage is generally used only on weekend nights when they're doing maintenance in the Center City Tunnel. That's when the streetcars, instead of going through the tunnel, go what is called over the top on the diversion trackage. Now, during the day on weekends and during the day, all the time on weekdays, there's almost no streetcar traffic on the diversion trackage. So there's plenty of time for photo stops. And one of our favorite locations is here on Filbert Street, a real quiet street where we can snap a few photos. This slightly elevated shot of the Peter Witt was thanks to a 6-foot-high snowbank that had been placed there by the city of Philadelphia when they cleaned the streets here. Number 8. Yeah, the 2732 again. The 2732 has been our most used car on these trips. We used it on 5 consecutive trips at one point here, simply because it just looks so good with the dark green and cream scheme. Just the dusting of snow on the ground for this one here in places. And we were out on the 15. Once again, the 15 was out of service for temporarily bust, but still usable at this point in time. And there's a church in the background there. You'll see that in several shots. It's one of our favorite photo stops. On the 36 back at the MAB paint place. You've seen that before in a few shots. And out on the 13 going over SEPTA's regional rail. For number 9, we had a 2-car charter again. 2732 is back. That's the second car there. And we had Red Arrow car 2799 once again. That building there in the background with the bay windows, you'll see that pop up a few more times as we go through different years. So once again, we're on the diversion trackage here. So we're out of the way of regular service streetcars. So there's plenty of time to do photo stops. So you'll see quite a few photos taken from this area here. Here we have a meet with a K car. And coming out of the tunnel. Now, I don't remember if we actually went into the tunnel or not. I have no photos taken inside the tunnel for this year. So if we went in, we didn't do any photo stops in there. But by this time, the PCCs might not have been allowed in there. We may have just backed one of the cars down to the portal and posed it there for photos. One thing I wish I had done was take better notes as to all the routes we covered. We are always required to submit a route in advance to SEPTA about where we want to go. 50% of the time, we don't stick to that. We just kind of wander wherever the sun angles dictate. And then we got down to Eastwick and we sent the 2799 through the loop and back out again and did this meet shot with the 2732. So one of my favorite photos of our PCC era of the streetcar specials. And there's that building with the bay windows again. You'll see that a few more times. And churches. For number 10, we had the 2732 once again. We're now in 2003. And one of the things that's been popping up around the city of late are murals. They're all over some of the older brick buildings. And here we have our car posed next to one of those murals with a trolley on it.
Have we made the transition? Oh, I'm sorry. Have we made the transition to digital yet?
We, what year did I say this was?
I think 2003.
No, we have not.
Okay.
Got 3 more to go before I go digital.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, these are all slides still. One of the cool shots I like doing when conditions allow is this shot here on 38th Street on the diversion trackage. It's a busy road, but there's a left-hand turn lane there, you see. We pulled just into that so cars can get around us. But this is from a pedestrian walkway over 38th Street. And it takes a little bit of doing because you got to get off the trolley, walk to the left about half a block to get to the stairway to get up onto this overpass. And if it's a sunny day, you can't do it because you're shooting directly into the sun. But on a cloudy day, it's a pretty cool shot. On Filbert Street, once again, on the diversion trackage, there's this cool window with the reflection of our streetcar in it. And crossing over Market Street. This is always a fun shot to do. You never know what traffic is going to do here. And of course, here we are standing in the middle of Market Street with a green light for traffic coming up behind us, while we shoot our streetcar out in the middle of the street. Life is interesting sometimes on these charters. We went out to the Mount Moriah Cemetery. The gatehouse is still there, falling apart, but there's a loop here, and we often do photo stops here. Coming down past a former Wawa. And once again, we're back out to the Eastwick Loop again. And here's our car in the loop. (2004) was a single car charter for number 11. I'm still shooting film here. Here we are at the 40th Street portal, meeting the regular service Kawasaki car. You'll notice the roll sign on our car says Route 60. Whenever we could, we would find some cool former trolley routes on the roll signs and put them up there every now and then. Later on, you'll see we have a whole lot more fun with the electronic destination signs on these cars. Coming around near the Woodland Depot here. Now, this trip here, we wound up out at Darby, and this was Groundhog Day. And some group was doing a fundraiser to raise money towards restoring the old trolley bridge in Darby, which you can see in the background here. And the folks from SEPTA on our charter said it'd be a good idea if some of us would wander over there during the rest stop and give some moral support to the group that was raising the money. So a few of us wandered over there, and it was interesting. Before we left, we all wound up singing, I kid you not, singing groundhog carols. No, I guess we could still take PCCs into the tunnel, because here we are with our car with a Route 6.
Getting some questions in the chat about groundhog carols. I'm not going to ask you to reenact any of those, but
yeah, no, it's yeah, it was interesting. Here coming out of the portal, so yeah, we can still take PCCs into the tunnel at this time. Must not have shot them in the tunnel that one trip where I didn't have anything. Here we are out near the Woodland Depot again. And there's that building with the bay windows on the diversion trackage. Different angle for this day. And like I said, we look for these churches along the way. A lot of times what we'll do on these trips is we'll unload for a photo. And if we see another good photo location, a block or two up the street, we'll walk up the street sometimes, get ahead of the car and do some longer shots of it in the city streets. We'll see a few of those a little bit later on here. Number 12 was on February 5th, 2005. This was interesting. SEPTA had tried to restart service on Girard Avenue with the PCC2s, but they had the big dispute with the neighbors over parking up at the Callow Hill Depot. So the PCC2s were sitting around unused until September of 2005. Meanwhile, we asked SEPTA if we could take 2 of them out on a charter, and much to our surprise, SEPTA said yes. So they ferried 2 cars down to Elmwood, and away we went with a 2-car PCC2 charter. Here we are down the Eastwick Loop with a regular service K car. Our 2 cars together down there. Here we are at the Mount Moriah Loop again. 2 cars in the loop. There's the gatehouse in the background. This was one of the years the Eagles were in the Super Bowl. So for part of the charter, we decorated our 2 cars with Eagles paraphernalia. So here go our Eagles streetcars along Route 10. By this time here, this photo stop here, the lead car had lost its Eagles decorations, but the trailing car still has them. And in the loop at Yaden. And coming down Route 13. For Super Saturday Streetcar Special 13, SEPTA would not ferry any PCC2s down to Elmwood. Service had started on the 15 by this point out of Callow Hill. So for these charters here, this charter here, we started out of the Callow Hill Depot. Our patrons usually far prefer trips that originate out of Elmwood, simply because it's less city driving and fairly close to I-95. We have done a couple of trips out of Callow Hill. We did one early on out of Germantown. Here we are on Route 15 with our PCC2s on a grubby day at Girard College. We had a single car out this day, but here I'm meeting a regular service Kawasaki, a regular service PCC2 on the 15. And then along the trackage on Richmond Street, I-95 overhead, the trackage into Port Richmond going across the road here. And out at Westmoreland, the end of the line, our charter car is on the right, and there's two regular service PCC2s on the left. Near Girard College, I believe. This is with the skyline in the background. And another one of those murals we found to shoot with our streetcar. Out on Route 10. And this is on the 13. 13 got places that are nice and wide open like this. And traffic out this way isn't as bad as it is on some of the other routes. So we do a lot of photo stops out on this part of the 13. Here we are on a gloomy, gloomy day back at Mount Moriah Cemetery with the gatehouse in the background. For number 14, we're back up at Callow Hill again because we wanted to do 15 again. This was pretty much a repeat of the previous year, but in better weather. That's our charter car on the left with a regular service PCC2 going by us on the right. And coming underneath the Frankfurt Elevated on Girard Avenue. And once again, with the skyline in the background. This is out at the Westmoreland Loop. And going past Girard College on the way back in. Coming down Route 10 with the Pennsylvania Railroad in the background. And here's our charter car meeting a regular service K car. Here's one of those instances where we could walk from the photo stop to down the street a ways, then shoot back with a telephoto to get a nice compressed scene as our car came to pick us up. And out at the Yaden Loop with two regular service K cars. That was the first trip I did digitally. This is the second digital trip I did. Slides are now gone. For number 15, they set up our PCC2 down to Elmwood again for us. So here we are coming out of the Elmwood Depot as a regular Route 36 car goes by. For this trip here, we also chartered work car number 2194, the last true PCC on the SEPTA roster. Unlike the PCC2s, it's completely unrebuilt. And SEPTA let us charter it for the day. So it followed us around for photos. Here we see our two charter cars in the back with a regular service K car at Yaden. And once again on Filbert Street. This is the same location on Filbert Street. And on Baltimore Avenue. And coming towards the end of Baltimore Avenue here. And once again, we're on the 13th here, heading towards Yaden. What's left of an orange tree with our orange work car. For number 16, we officially were started at the Malvern Loop. That's where all of our Callow Hill based trips officially started from. Folks who wanted to ride the Deadhead move from Callow Hill out to Malvern Loop were more than welcome if they wanted to leave their cars at Callow Hill to ride out to Malvern Loop with us. But here's the first official photo stop of the trip coming out of the Malvern Loop. And for this trip here, we're back on the 15 again. Here we are on that piece of trackage where the 10 and the 15 are briefly together on Lancaster Avenue, where Girard Avenue does a bit of a zig and a zag. And once again, coming underneath the Frankfurt L on Girard Avenue. And back at Westmoreland, if you'll notice the automobile on the right there, its license plate, New York plates, PCC cars. Coming up on the bridges that are around I-95 area. All this is still out of service. This part here was out of service for a long while for the I-95 construction project. They put the new short-term loop at Sugar House Casino. So this stretch here has been out of service for a real long time. Hopefully this year it'll be back in service at some point. Oh, this was the day that officially SEPTA was running no streetcars on Route 15. The line had been shut down for, I believe, a water main project. So SEPTA had arranged to run buses on Route 15 that day. But we checked with the maintenance forces before we left and said, hey, can you get a streetcar through the construction site? And they go, yeah, we can do that. So we had the entire Route 15 to ourselves. That meant we could do things like this shot here, where we stopped under the SEPTA's Reading Bridge here at 9th Street, just sat there until train went overhead. We had no worries about blocking any other streetcars. So we could just sit here and wait for the shot to happen. Back to Girard College again. Once again, provides quite a backdrop. And on the Route 10. And you all know, you all have seen that building before. Okay, here we are for number 17 on March 21st, 2010. Now, you all know the Super Bowl is not played in March. What happened was we were scheduled to go out on February 6th, but a massive snowstorm came in the day before, and SEPTA canceled our charter. We were going to cancel anyhow because we just couldn't get people to the car. So what we do in those cases are we send out a survey, and we pick 2 consecutive weekends, both Saturday and Sunday, take a poll and say which days can you absolutely not make it, and whichever day has the most people can make it as our makeup date for a snow out. So we got a makeup date at the end of February, and it snowed again. We got snowed out a second time. So once again, we did the survey, and the winning date was Sunday, March 21st. So this remains the only Super Saturday trip that has run on a Sunday. We started off with PCC 2334 out of Elmwood, and we're going along, and the PCC is starting to give us problems. Here we are on Elmwood Avenue. I should also mention that after the 2 snowouts, this March date we picked, it was 70 degrees and sunny. So quite the warmest of our trips we've ever run. There's that building again with the bay windows, completely different angle again. Now, by this point here, right about here, the car just gave out. Our operator, Bill Monahan, managed to coax it back to life, and we were able to limp over to the Callow Hill Depot, where we swapped the PCC2 for a K car. Now, like I said, we try to do unusual stuff. At the time, there were very, very, very few K cars that had the electronic destination signs installed. So we picked one of those. But what do you do that's unusual with a K car? Well, obviously, doing the subway surface lines like we were going to do that's pretty routine for them. So we scrapped our initial routing and took the K car out on Route 15, where you don't get K cars running. So we did get some, still got some unusual scenes you don't get in regular service. Here we are on Richmond, along I-95, and on the bridge work around I-95. And coming west on Girard Avenue. And then on to the Route 10. Number 18, 2011, gloomy, rainy day. PCC2 out of Elmwood. Here we are leaving the Elmwood Depot. A lot of snow on the ground for this one. We headed out to Darby, then worked our way up to Yeadon on the connecting track there. That's only used at certain times. 13 terminates in Yeadon, 11 terminates in Darby. There's a piece of track between the two that occasionally regular service operates on. And up to Yeadon. Once again, it was gloomy, so we tried our shot on 38th Street from the pedestrian overpass. And here we see our charter car meeting two back-to-back regular service PCC2s on Girard Avenue. Then out on the 10, out near the Big Penzie Bridge, at I believe that's 52nd Street. Here's some of our patrons at one of our photo stops. And out on the 13, we got a regular service car catching up to us here. Time to get back on our car and get out of the way. Number 19, in 2012, we tried something unusual. This is the first time we intentionally chartered a Kawasaki car. In fact, we chartered 2 of them. We chartered car number 9,000, the lowest numbered car on the roster. First one delivered. and car 9111, the highest car number on the roster. And we MU'd them together for a trip. The cars are capable of MUing. SEPTA seldom runs them in MU configuration, but for the charter, we did it. Here we see our two-car train in the Center City Tunnel. And coming out of the tunnel. Makes for quite a lengthy train because there's quite a bit of room between the two cars where the drawbar is. Here's one of those murals in the city that we shot, meeting a regular service K car. And out at 52nd Street again, this time with a SEPTA train going by. And a view of the skyline. This gives you some idea of the distance, the length of the drawbar between the two cars when they're MU'd together. And once again, out on the 13 heading towards Yaden. A smaller church that we haven't used very often on our charters for photos. And then we finished off the day down at the Eastwick Loop, our two-car train coming across Old Island Avenue there, the service road for the shopping area. Number 20 had a PCC2. We started off on Route 36 heading down to Eastwick. And once again, one of my favorite spots is the 40th Street portal with these houses in the background. And we found this nice string of row houses to put in the background for one of our shots. Another mural. And out by the Woodland Depot, we met a regular service K car. Back on Baltimore Avenue again. And we're still on Baltimore Avenue. Another nice set of row houses in the background for this shot here. Going across Market Street. And our bay windows again. For number 21 in 2014, we did something completely different. For the first time ever, we went out on the Red Arrow lines out of Upper Darby, 69th Street. SEPTA had wrapped K-Car 101 in a wrap commemorating 100 years of the arrival of the Philadelphia and Westchester Traction Company into media. And so we chartered the wrapped car for a trip. Here we are meeting a regular service media car. And over at Smedley Park near Springfield. This was the work car that was out that day. It was not officially part of the charter, but they knew we were out and we were in communication with them for part of the trip. So we staged this meet here. And then later on, they made sure they were in position to pose for a photo for us for the side-by-side shot over Darby Creek. And then this is at the Clifton Alden SEPTA station. We parked the streetcar here in the street and just waited. We knew it was close. Waited for this SEPTA train to come overhead into the shot. Caused a bit of a traffic tie-up, but it was a good shot. This is at Sharon Hill, end of the Sharon Hill line. That's our car coming out of Sharon Hill. In the background is a regular service car in the Sharon Hill station. And in between is the big dip underneath the Baltimore and Ohio, now CSX main line. Looks pretty good. And this wrap stayed on the car for a few years. It's pretty cool. Number 22 in 2015, got another one of our PCC2s out of Elmwood for this trip. And here we are back at Mount Moriah. And out on the 13. On the diversion trackage on Filbert Street. And meeting the regular service PCC2 out near the Philadelphia Zoo on Girard Avenue. Here's our charter car coming at us at the loop-de-loop around Parkside with a regular service car running right to left on Girard Avenue. And another one of those murals. This mural here is kind of interesting. If you look carefully, you'll see a Pennsylvania Railroad K4 and a PRR GG1 together on the mural. And heading out to Eastwick with a regular service K car catching up to us at the end of the day. For 23, another K car trip, or another PCC2 trip rather, out of Elmwood. Here we are leaving the Elmwood Depot, crossing over the B&O CSX at Darby, in the Yaden Loop with two regular service cars. Still at Yaden. And by one of our favorite churches for photography. We have a supervisor who often will follow our trips around in a truck. He doesn't have to, but he generally has nothing else to do. That's more important. So he just follows us around in the truck and helps with traffic control sometimes, does things like that. We got out near the Woodland shop this one particular day, and he's like, hey, do you guys want to take the trolley into the shop? We're like, well, yeah, sure. So he arranged to have the gate opened up and the overhead wire energized. And we got some rare mileage going through the Woodland shop that day. So here we are, where our photo stop back in the shop area. Back out at the 40th Street portal. And once again, Mount Moriah Cemetery. We had asked for 2194, the work car on this trip here, and we got a mixed response. The folks at Elmwood loved the idea. They got the car all spruced up. They said we could have it for the day and take it out for the charter. But then the folks in Center City put a kibosh on it. They said, no, you can't take the work car out on the charter. We're afraid it's going to break down somewhere. So we had it out only for a short time from Elmwood down to Eastwick. And here we see our chartered PCC2 doing the meet shot with the work car. 24. We have now figured out how to program the destination signs. So Destination sign actually says on it, Super Saturday Streetcar Special 24. This is a one-car charter with a regular service car catching up behind us. Here we see the destination sign now says Railfan and Railroad. I had nothing to do with this. Someone else programmed the sign to say that. And here was our photo line with our charter car. Now says PCC's Forever on it. And coming into the Callow Hill Depot. And coming back out of the Callow Hill Depot. There's our supervisor in the truck behind us there. So if nothing's more pressing, he'll just follow us around and make sure there's no trouble anywhere. Here we are at the Yaden Loop with 2 regular service K cars. 25, Magic 25. We had another wrapped car, this time on the city division. They wrapped a Kawasaki car to celebrate 125 years of electric streetcar service in Philadelphia. So we chartered the wrapped car for the day. Here we are at Darby. And once again, crossing over the B&O in Darby. I think that church had red doors in previous photos. And coming into Callow Hill. And out of Callow Hill. Once again, the Eagles were in the Super Bowl this particular year. So we had an Eagles banner hanging off the front of the car for part of the trip. Our destination sign now says Go Eagles, Super Bowl champs. This was the day before the game, by the way. So they weren't officially champs until about 30 hours after the charter ended. Into the Center City Tunnel. Our destination sign now says 37 Westinghouse. That's a route that hasn't been around for a while. And going by Bartram's Garden. 26 PCC2. Route 38 City Hall, another long gone route. Once again, going past one of the murals around the city. And another mural. Now we got Route 40 on the destination sign. And we're back at the mural with the GG1 and the K4. Another instance where you can walk up the block a little bit and then shoot back with a telephoto view, compress some of the neat buildings in the background. We got out to Yaden and just accidentally ran into the wrapped K car that we had used the previous year. It was out in regular service that day. Once again, row homes. Sometimes if we're out shooting pictures and a curious neighbor pokes out of their door and to see what's going on, we'll ask permission to use their porch to get some elevation for shots like this. They've always been very accommodating, even though they might think we're a little bit on the crazy side. And we're back at Eastwick, heading back to Elmwood with a regular service K car behind us. 27, we're back out on Red Arrow again. And this time we added a shop tour before the charter. So we got a tour of the Market Frankfurt subway elevated shops there at 69th Street before our charter left. This time we did a split trip, half the trip on the Media Sharon Hill lines and half the trip on the Norristown High Speed line. Here we are at Smedley Park again. And in downtown Media, going by the theater. And at Clifton Alden, coming underneath the SEPTA regional rail line there. And crossing over Darby Creek. Then we went back to Upper Darby, took a quick break and transferred over to the Norristown high-speed line. And we had a chartered N5 car out there. Here we are at the powerhouse. And this is at Villanova, the new dorms that have gone up along the tracks there. With our chartered car, what we could do was we would pull into, like here, we pulled into the Radnor station. We unloaded. We backed our car up. Our car is the one on the left. We backed it up just a little bit, then just sat there and waited so we could do stuff like getting a meet with another of the N5 cars. I think this is Ardmore Avenue. And then 28 in 2022, we skipped 2021. Pandemic took us out. We couldn't do anything on SEPTA in 2021. So we skipped a year, and number 28 was in 2022. And we got another wrapped car. Here we are underground in the Center City Tunnel at the 13th Street station. And coming out of the tunnel, this car here is wrapped to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the Elmwood District. The Elmwood District was formed when the K cars were delivered. Brand new car barn was built to maintain the K cars. And for the anniversary, they wrapped this car. This is out at the Malvern Loop. This McDonald's is one of the 1990s era McDonald's. We had read that it was scheduled for demolition. The University of Penn had purchased it. They were going to tear it down and put a high rise in here. So one of our photo stops was going past this 1990s era McDonald's. We're back out to Mount Moriah. Now you can see that the gatehouse is being propped up with wood at this point. There is a group, the Friends of the Mount Moriah Cemetery, that is desperately trying to shore up and save what's left of the gatehouse. They've already done a nice job of clearing a lot of the weeds out of the cemetery itself. And crossing over the B&O CSX main line in Darby again. So I'm going to finish up here with just 3 short notes. Note number 1, this is kind of interesting. Car 2750, one of the Chestnut Hill cars, we used it in 1997 on one of our trips. Well, it was one of the cars that got shipped off to Brookville for rebuilding to a PCC2. And 2750 came back as the 2320. And we used it again in 2009 and 2016. It's the only car that we used over the course of the years that was, we used both as a PCC and again as a PCC2. Note number 2, these trips would not be possible without the cooperation of the folks at SEPTA. Here we see 3 of the key people that have made these trips possible. On the left is Ted Mills. He's a supervisor out on the Red Arrow. And for our Red Arrow trips, he's the one that makes sure we stay out of the way of regular service cars, gets us in position to be, have plenty of time for photos. And on our Norristown high speed line trip, he's the one that set up the shots for meets and things. In the middle is Ed Springer. He's retired from SEPTA now. Ed was the person in charge of charters for many, many years at SEPTA. And he was one call does it all. He's a rail fan, understands sun angles. If I wanted to do a trip, I called up Ed, said, hey, Ed, I need a PCC2 out of Elmwood for 5 hours on February 3rd. Ed said, okay. And that was the extent of it. Done. Ready to go. And on the right is Bill Monahan. Bill's been an operator on the vast majority of our trips out of the Elmwood district. He was the operator on our close call on Route 23 with the box truck way back when. He was the operator on that same trip, operator on the burn car, the crash and burn trip. Bill's kind of taken over shepherding the charters along. So thanks to him. Also, others to mention on the left here is Russell Greco. He's retired operator from SEPTA now. Russell was often our second operator on two-car charters, and he was the operator on our the 2194 on our work car charter. Once again, you have Ed Springer in the middle. And on the right is Gary G-Man Mason. Gary is an operator out of Callow Hill and was the operator on our Callow Hill charters. And finally, Super Saturday Streetcar Special 29 is coming up on February 11th, 2023. Less than 2 weeks from now. Tickets are still available. We have about 7 seats left at www.wilmingtonchaptertrips.com. We are going to be taking a K car out on the subway surface lines, but we will, as part of what we try to do, something unusual every trip, we will actually have a tour, more of a walkthrough to photograph the PCC2s being rebuilt at the Woodland shops. We'll get a chance to go inside the shops and take pictures on this trip. So that's a little bit special. There's about 7 seats left. If you want to go, order tickets soon. With that, I am going to sign off. Thank you very much, folks.
Thank you so much, Steve. Do you have to be a member of the Wilmington chapter to get a ticket?
You do not.
Okay. Well, you heard it here, folks. There are about 7 seats left. And let's see, who said that? David Warner says in the chat that operators are standing by to take your order. So that should be a lot of fun. And I'll let everybody unmute themselves in just a minute here, but I did want to let everyone know before we do that, we've got a couple programs coming up here. February 21st, we have Jim Crow on Streetcars, Challenging Separate But Equal, presented by Eric Madison, who I believe is a trustee at National Capital Trolley Museum. And March 7th, we'll have the Dayton and Xenia Railway, How Not to Abandon a Rail Line. And that'll be presented by Tom Morrow from Dayton. And then at the museum, our opening weekend will be Bunny Trolley, which starts March 31st. So if you want, you can come out and see us for that. And as always, please help support the museum online at patrolley.org/support. You can learn how to become a member. You can learn how to donate, become a volunteer. And I do want to thank everybody again who donated during the registration process tonight. Let's see. Now let me make it here so that we can unmute. Thank you so much to Steve for this presentation. Allow participants to unmute themselves. And if you're having any problems turning your video on, let me know and I'll get that for you. Okay, so a couple questions that I had for you, Steve. Were you ever able to catch a freight at the Darby crossing?
We have not been able to. And unfortunately, that is such a busy piece of road that we can't stay there very long for our photo stops.
Yeah.
Occasionally, you know, a freight is in the area, but we just can't wait for them.
Yeah. And then I have come to know that when people tell stories of charters, there's always crazy stories. You told a bunch during your program tonight, and it seems that a lot of strange things happen during lunch breaks. Do you guys have like regular lunch breaks, or is this like you snack while you're on the car, or bring your own lunch? How does that work?
We tell people to eat a big breakfast and bring snacks.
Okay.
We try to do a rest stop somewhere about halfway through each trip. The exact timing of that varies on if we see a good photo location and need to stop for that first or not. So
sure.
But bring snacks.
Sorry, go ahead.
Bring snacks, and because even though SEPTA prohibits eating on trolleys in regular service, There is no prohibition during the charters of bringing your own food. If you bring Wawa hoagies, I got to bring enough for everybody.
Good advice. And lastly, are the streetcars going to be decorated this year?
They are. We are going to have the streetcar decorated, at least for part of the trip, in Eagles regalia. So that will happen.
Excellent. So if you do have a question for Steve, you should be able to unmute yourself at this time. I also put a link to his website or his books in the chat. So feel free to click that and check out Steve's books. Any questions or comments for Steve?
Steve, this is Ed Kohler from New York. As an ardent Giants fan, I will not ride a Eagles decorated trolley car, but 2024 is a possibility. I just want to thank you for a wonderful presentation. The stuff was great. And I want to thank Kristen for taking the time to organize it. And have a good evening, folks.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I want to thank a couple people in the chat, actually. David Warner, and who else was in there? Bob Wright, and George for giving lots of like location information. I know a lot of your photos had like the cross street sign in it, but for the ones that didn't, everybody was like typing in where it was. So it's very helpful.
Okay, I can't think fast enough to remember where they all were during the show, but I'm glad somebody was on top of that.
Any questions or comments? Feel free to unmute yourself. You can find that button in the bottom left of most screens.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Gary from New York. And I was wondering what that the 23 trolley line, the tracks and the wires been up for years and there's no service there. Why is that? And are they going to ever bring service back, or
in a lot of places the wire is now gone and the tracks are paved over? I think they're all still there under the pavement somewhere. 23 is not coming back, not without a lot of work and some real dedication from SEPTA. So no, it's not happening.
Well, I think the track the last time a year ago I was in Philly, it was still on 12th Street, the wire and the tracks.
The 23 was split into two bus routes. They broke it down because it was too hard to keep the schedules.
I see. Okay. Thank you. And great presentation.
Thanks.
Other questions or comments for Steve? Some suggested in the chat that now might be the time if you want to join one of these charters. Don't wait for future years.
No, don't wait for future years. It's getting harder and harder to run these charters, mostly because traffic in the city now just can't do the photo stops like you used to be able to. Plus, some of the key people have retired or are retiring very soon. So I've pretty much decided that after number 30, I'm going to step away from it. So 2 more to go. This one and next one.
All right.
Yeah,
So go ahead.
Just a crazy question. Not nothing to do with the charter. What's the status of the PCC2s, and what lines in Philly are still running with trolleys?
11, 13, 34, 36. I'm missing
102, 102, 101, 102.
Yeah, our trolleys. 15. If you listen to SEPTA, 15 is coming back in October. I wouldn't bank on that, but that's what SEPTA is currently saying. They need to get enough of the PCC 3s redone to restore service. They've got 4 finished now. 2 more in the shop, close to being finished, but they need at least 12 to start service again. It's taken them years to get the first 4.5 done. So
They're talking now, maybe start up with just what they have in September.
yeah, they have to add, these buses supplementing it. They can't use K cars out on the 15 because the 15 was rebuilt with money that had ADA requirements attached to it. And the K cars are not ADA compliant.
The rebuilt cars, I think, are going to be really nice.
I got a question. In one of the slides, it referenced the Darby Bridge, that it didn't belong to PRT, it belonged to Chester Traction. And I
Okay.
think if you look in Cox's book, I think you'll find that's the reverse. There was a double track for the 71 and the 76 came across there to go into Darby Terminal. And the southeastern traction that ran from Darby to Wilmington actually ended on Chester Pike and was later connected to the 71 and the 76. And they used that bridge only on one track to loop around. So I think that might be reversed in that. Take a look at, if you got a chance, take a look at Cox's book on Delaware County, Delaware Valley traction, Delaware County traction. I think you'll find the answer in there.
Right. Other questions or comments about Steve's presentation or the upcoming charter? All righty. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. Thank you to Steve for putting all this together, especially probably some scanning involved, unless you already had all that done.
I have actually scanned all 145,000 of my slides.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's good. So we'll come back to you for some future presentation then.
Okay.
But thank you again for joining us. Thank you again to those of you who donated. And again, if you have an idea for a Trolleyology presentation, please reach out to me, assistant@patrolley.org. And we hope you can join us in February for our next presentation or some other time this year, or at the museum when we open for the season, especially later this year when we open our new building. So thank you again. Have a wonderful week, everyone. Goodbye.
You too, Kristen. Goodbye.